Welcome back to this Summit TV special program on forest health management in the wake of the mountain pine beetle epidemic. Joining me for this next discussion are Elissa Knox with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and Ashley Nettles with the U.S. Forest Service here in the Dillon Ranger District. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thank you.
So we've seen some pretty amazing impacts from the mountain pine beetle epidemic across Summit County. Can you talk to us about the impacts to wildlife species here in the forest?
Yeah, it really just depends on the species. Every species is going to react differently to disturbances like this. A couple of examples, we've got the woodpecker populations that are increasing right now. They have really taken advantage of the increased bug population with the beetles in the trees. And we've actually had one of our sensitive species taken off of our sensitive species list because their populations are doing so well. So that's one example of how animals are affected. On the other hand, we have small mammal habitat for chipmunks and squirrels, hares, things like that. They rely on oftentimes the cones and the seed supply from the lodgepole pines, and that's not being provided anymore. So their habitat has been degraded quite a bit due to the pine beetle epidemic. We also have Canada lynx. We have resident Canada lynx here in Summit County on the Dillon Ranger District. And with all the dead and dying trees that are starting to fall, their denning habitat is likely increasing. So another positive that comes out of it. So it really does just depend on the species.
And some of our migratory big game animals like elk and mule deer have benefited from an increase in ground forage in areas where the forest canopy has opened up, and we're actually finding animals more dispersed across the landscape. Forest generalists like black bear or moose, those animals tend to seek out the most suitable habitat every year. So they're going to be moving around a bit more rather than returning to the same areas year after year. So the effects of the pine beetle epidemic have affected species differently depending on their needs, but keep in mind that both fire and pine beetle are natural endemic disturbances, and our native wildlife have co-evolved to exist alongside these processes.
That's a great point. So the Forest Service and other agencies, along with private property owners, have been doing quite a bit recently to mitigate the impacts of the mountain pine beetle epidemic by cutting trees that are impacted. Could you maybe talk about how those forest treatments impact wildlife species here in the forest?
Again, it just depends on the species, but there's no doubt that negative effects can occur to individual animals from the actual operations. It's a disturbance in their habitat, and individuals can be displaced temporarily, but it is a short-term impact. It's not long-lasting. Animals, if they are displaced, will usually return once the operations cease.
And some of the negative short-term effects can be lessened by implementing seasonal closures to avoid displacing wildlife during their critical reproductive time period in the springtime, and also during the winter when displacement can lower survival.
It's a challenging process, but we do work really hard to ensure that the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term impacts to animals, and it's just a delicate line finding that right balance for all the resources.
Great. So once these timber projects are complete, what can we expect in terms of wildlife activity in these treated areas?
Over the long term, this will open up a lot of areas and help stimulate the understory, which provides grasses and forbs for a lot of our big game like deer and elk to forage on. It will also help stimulate the regeneration process and to diversify stands of timber throughout the forest, so we don't have the same age class of trees everywhere. And these open areas that are adjacent to timber and cover are very beneficial to wildlife, both during the reproductive period and during the winter time. And some other species that will benefit over the long term are Canada lynx and snowshoe hare. These forests, as they regenerate, will provide much higher quality habitat.
Great. Wow. Thank you very much, Elissa and Ashley,
Sure.
for all your helpful information for myself and the viewers. I really appreciate you both taking the time to share your expertise today. And thanks to all of you who have joined us in this discussion about forest health management in the wake of the mountain pine beetle epidemic. I hope you've learned as much as I have about all the important work that's being done to mitigate the mountain pine beetle epidemic and address wildfire threats across the county. If you'd like any additional information, please Google U.S. Forest Service, White River National Forest, or call the Dillon Ranger District Office at 970-468-5400. You can also stop by the Dillon Ranger District Office at 680 Blue River Parkway in Silverthorne. The knowledgeable and helpful staff and volunteers there will help you with information and resources about your next recreational opportunity here in Summit County. If you'd like to watch this program again or share it with others, please go to summitnews.com. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope to see you out on the trails.